So, Dorsey, welcome to the Black and Raww Podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's all right. It's all right. So I just sort of want to get stuck into the meat of it, of this episode. And I wanted to know from you in terms of how did prison sort of shape your perspective on life and the work that you do now?
Probably when I initially went to the county jail and prior to the prison, the extraordinary thing that you visibly can see was the large concentration of people who were being incarcerated of African descent. And, and at a certain point when I'm sitting in jail and I'm sitting in prison, I started examining, why am I there and what made me, that led me to my incarceration. And at first, I was thinking it was just me. Then when you look around and you see the disproportionate rate, and I didn't learn about the rate, I just knew that the numbers looked a little bit skewed from the county that I'd been in, the life that I experienced prior to going to jail and going to prison. What had happened was it was like what it was that I thought about. It was like, man, suppose Dorsey could just take as a given, I'm an asshole. What happened to all the other people that was there? They couldn't, you couldn't, they weren't all assholes. So you look around, just think, if there was probably I guess Jewish people ran into it when they got to Dachau and Auschwitz. They said, well, we see a few Jewish people. a few gypsies. We see a few gay people, and they might be saying, well, the target is us. They say as a Jew, the target would be them. And sitting in the county jail and sitting in that environment, the numbers wasn't matching what my perception was. So that was the initial parts of, like the consciousness of hitting it. And it was like, well, man, I didn't know, and I still hadn't figured it out, because at first it was like, man, I had participated in a robbery that led to the death of a person. So like, then according to the law, I was guilty of all these things, and by the way, they changed the law since then. So, I don't know if I would be guilty right now, because I think that if you went in and you were sitting in a car, and somebody went in the store and robbed it and shot somebody, you wouldn't necessarily be charged with first-degree murder. Mm-hmm. You could have, some other things that could be occurring. But even then, even when I went to the Alameda County Jail, we was looking out through the windows to the bars, and we can see the apartment building in which UAP Newton lived. And, so it's like, we'd have conversations, it's like, hey, man, that's where you live, man, and he's really, really trying to make a difference.
Mm. So I guess when you first came in, you just saw the disparity between, wow, there's a lot of African Americans that are here. And I can't remember the statistic off my head, but I know there is sort of a very large population of African Americans compared to their white counterparts that have been incarcerated. Even here in England, I think there is a very large representation of ethnic minorities in prison.
But the other thing that when I was there, I seen a lot of people who were pleading guilty. Mm. So it's like at a certain point, it led to, probably the first chapter of the book, innocence unavailable and guilt not required. Because at a certain point, when people kept, if there was a presumption of innocence, people would be actually going to trial to a larger extent. But I think that as African Americans, we were like, and we went to trial. We didn't think that we could not be found guilty. Yeah. And in fact, my circumstances as a child indicated that that presumption of innocence didn't necessarily apply to me. And it probably didn't apply to Black people in general since the abolition of chattel slavery, because they came out with laws pigs laws and a whole bunch of other things to actually start requiring people to actually not make a decision about labor.
Yeah.
Because like the chain gangs and all the rest of it was still there. But at the point that I was entering jail, I hadn't read any material. I didn't necessarily have control of the ability to read at that point, and it was later on. But that presumption of innocence, I clearly thought that something was wrong. And then probably there was a Gideon decision that came down years earlier. And the Gideon decision basically was celebrating the fact that we had the right to have a court-appointed attorneys. But to the most part, the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration in the United States came after that. In terms of the raw numbers, the massive number of people that was being incarcerated. And they start processing people at a much more efficient rate. So I don't know if the attorneys that were standing beside me, in retrospect, if they legitimized the process that was probably immoral to begin with.
Yeah. And you mentioned that in terms of you learned to read when you were in prison. And so when you were thinking about the circumstances that led to your incarceration, I feel like not being able to read definitely would have had quite an impact in terms of how successful you were at school and how that, meant that you showed up in the world and what sort of options that leads you on to if you have that ability. But I think they're probably... Go on.
But in a certain way, like I knew something was peculiar that happened when I went from grade school on. I knew that when we moved into the neighborhood, that people, there was a white flight, blockbusting, and redlining. I didn't know those terms as a kid. I didn't know those terms when I was sitting in the county jail. Those terms I learned later when I was in prison, and I'm beginning to look at it. And by the way, most of the time that sometimes people say, are you rationalizing the fact that you went to prison? And I'm not rationalizing anything. I had never said I'm in denial. I'm not in denial about the conversation that we're having, that I was found guilty of a crime, and that crime actually defined my participation as being convicted of felony murder. That right there, I'm not in denial. It's just senseless to deny it, since I'd already been punished. I'm already off parole, and I just somewhat had a successful life. But I'm saying that what I'm looking at is a wider array of things, because the fight is not necessarily a fight about me. The fight is about my grandkids and my great-grandkids, because they could get fed into a system that necessarily don't mean that they get a fair shake. It don't necessarily mean that when everybody else fled the community, my education was impacted because the people who were educators left the community. Mm-hmm. And the people who had actually came in as teachers after everybody had left weren't necessarily the most competent and qualified people, because they took with them a resource. And the resource was the ability to access education. So like if I'm saying I was going between the 3rd and 7th grade, walking into prison, I didn't drop out between the 3rd and 7th grade.
Yeah.
So the education that I got was inadequate. The other thing of it is that, once I went to prison and I started dealing with the presumption, there's 2 presumptions I don't think that I had access to. One was this, being innocent. The next thing the next presumption that I probably failed when I got out was the presumption of rehabilitation.
What were those presumptions, if you don't mind?
The presumption of innocence is like, you innocent until proven guilty. That's what they say in the United States all the time. But in the event that you didn't have white flight, blockbusting, and redlining, they're actually doing something with the systems that actually actually notify whatever presumption that they thought that I had. Yeah. And in addition to that, when you pick out your jury, most of the time, in the event that you had a conviction history, you're not sitting on the jury. So you're not being tried by a jury of your peers. And in fact, as a result of a mass incarceration, a lot of people ain't going to be able to sit on the jury. The other presumption is that when I got out of prison, that I was an educated person and I should be trusted. That's not necessarily what Ban the Box was about. It was putting a question on the application or in regards to housing, education, and a number of other things that actually identified you as a convicted person. And they didn't put that on that application as a result of giving people a fair chance. What they want to do is practice structural discrimination. And probably as a result of the disproportionate rate where Black people are incarcerated, to practice structural discrimination and racism. So like those things are still tied in a link. And initially when I ran into learned how to read, people fed me something that it wasn't like I'm picking up a book, run, Dick, run, Jane, run. When they started feeding me books, it was initially it was like when I was 19, 20, it was girly magazines and Lewis and more cowboy books. And my homeboy Nate slid up to me and said, "Man, do you think that when you get out of prison, you're going to be a cowboy?" So like you're like, well, what to read? Why are you reading this stuff? Why are you trying to read this stuff? And then they started feeding me materials probably within 2 years of more substantive work, especially more substantive work that actually was addressing the question of racism, classism, and sexism. Those was materials that I was reading, And in fact, those was materials I started to learn how to read with. So it wasn't like I learned how to read these other pieces of work that actually shaped my political destiny.
Yeah.
Started reading real stuff that, Transformative, Nunn, Malcolm X. I started reading Ralph Ellison. I started reading dialectical materialism. I started reading Adam Smith. I started reading a whole host of books. I started reading about leaders that was international, like Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong, Che Guevara, a whole bunch of materials that was coming across.
They said you could have been being radicalized in prison while you were there.
Absolutely. In addition to that, when I was in prison, at the point that I went, I think the point in the 70s was the most violent history, the most violent period of time in prison history. So that's what I wind up. And I didn't walk in with this gray hair on my face. I walked in and I hadn't even taken a shave.
Yeah, baby face.
Baby face. I think I walked in, I think I was weighing 145, maybe 150 pounds. People's out there lifting 400 pounds and doing bench presses with 400 pounds. Mm-hmm. Muscles like 18, 20-inch muscles. And it was like, oh, hell.
Don't break this twig.
Yeah, so at a certain point, when I seen the stabbing, I seen people beat up, and at a certain point, I was thinking about, man, I had never thought about would I kill anybody. Even when I was in prison for murder, I had never thought about it. What happens when you get to a space in an environment where you start thinking about, man, will I? Do I have to?
I don't want to.
A whole different set of circumstances. So like it was in the book I wrote a article, Commitment to Kill. The thing that I regret, I should have expanded the article, expanded the title of that chapter, Commitment to Kill in order to survive, in order to live. Now there was a number of people that was coming through. They said, man, I would die for the cause. In retrospect, what I want to teach people in prison to do is to live for a cause and to live for social change.
Yeah.
Because just simply dying for the cause could mean that like you just could get. It don't necessarily mean that you would have a impact that actually bring about a change that actually conserve the interests of the community and serve the interests of your children and your family.
So So can I ask, how did you sort of, being in prison for a crime, which, not that you didn't commit, but in terms of the, by association more than anything, and in an environment where you're saying it's kill to survive, like how did you sort of maintain hope during this time? Like how can you sort of look back now and be like, you need to live for something rather than die for something?
I ran across a couple of things that probably inspired me. I ran across an attorney when I was in San Quentin named Michael Satras, because like one of the things that like my moms knew because I acted out in the courtroom. It wasn't like just go gentle into the night. When I got found guilty, we was fighting. We was physically fighting, like in the middle of the courtroom, because like, I didn't have the language. I didn't have and I knew that what they were going to do was punish me for a long period of time. And in fact, I probably got a new trial as a result of that fight. But the thing that stood out in a way was sitting in the jail and sitting in that thing. Those numbers is just so dramatic. At least for me, it was dramatic. And I didn't think that it went from an I question to a we question. It went from an I question to us question. Those was the things that and it ultimately figured like I couldn't resolve and turn this stuff by myself. So initially, when Michael Satras came up to visit me, what he gave me was a different method and a different way to actually exercise something that wasn't aggression, just physical aggression.
Yeah.
Because like when my mother called him, she was concerned that that my anger and my rage was actually doing something with me that was changing my personality back to somebody that I had been previously. But what Michael Satras did, he came in because on the way to a visit, they tied me, they drugged me out of a space, took me to the hospital, tied me down, and held me down while they were searching for theoretical contraband up the back of my ass, And at a certain point, I had already been engaged in conversations with my visitors, and he was talking about, rape is not a sexual act; it's an act of dominance. And from that point forward, every time that I would get searched, I would be saying, "Yeah," because like I didn't have any contraband to begin with.
Yeah.
Not at that point in prison history. And what they had did was that, and often like if I started reading. Every time that we get skin searched, unquote body search, and they tell us to cough, stick out our tongue, look behind your ear, lift your sack, and bend over and spread them. That was an act of dominance. It wasn't that much contraband that was coming in and flowing through the visiting room, but there were people that actually had access to contraband that was being brought in by people who was working there.
Yeah.
But the tool that he gave me was the question that was a significant question. Because I was sitting there on his first visit saying, man, as soon as I catch up with this dude that lied about me having something up my ass, it's on.
Yeah.
And what he did, was said, he kept talking to me. And I would be forever grateful. Then he talked to me for probably 3 hours, and then probably the question that he asked, what if I did him? Would it stop anybody else from getting done? And what we did was start changing policy, because like at one point, they would just drag you out, overwhelm you with the numbers, stick your hand up your ass, and then tell you to get dressed and leave. And what he was
treatments.
and what he was talking about was how did we litigate and change institutional policies. So, like, if they suspected somebody of having contraband, they would unclothe them, put them in a room, and you'd ultimately have to shit.
Mm.
You know, and that changed the policy, but it also changed the way that I thought about how to engage. You know, and in fact, the same guy that came to visit me when I got out of prison and started attending a university and got into conflict, I was calling him saying, "Hey, man, because I felt like he gave me good advice."
Yeah.
The other two people that I recognized was Kathy Labriola and Cheryl Miles, because they was visiting me for extended periods of time, and I had conversations with them. And in addition to that, when my brother passed, shortly after my brother passed, what Kathy did was came and brought me every letter that I wrote from 1974 to 1981. And I was reading the letters, and even when I wasn't conscious at the time that I was doing it, some of the letters some of the letters, it actually was talking about voting rights.
Mm.
And I was learning I didn't have the right to vote. I was telling Kathy, because Kathy asked me a question. When I was wondering and pondering with all of these men that was healthy, physically healthy, could we have the ability to actually go back to the community and actually change the circumstances and the environment in which we live? Could we rebuild the ghetto? That's what I was thinking about in certain periods of time. I was thinking about when people are coming back in, and I asked, because I had life, so people was jumping in and out of prison, and I asked the person, "Hey, man, if you don't like it here, why the fuck you coming? Excuse me, why are you coming back? Why you keep coming back? Man, do you get away at any point with a crime?"
Yeah, why are you here, man? Come on now.
Come on, man. This is your third trip. I ain't got a shot at freedom. Did you figure out anything? And what he told me was, I asked him, how come all the homies just keep coming back? They coming back on parole violation. They're coming back with a new offense. And he told me, the question was, Dorsey, they're coming back because of heroin addiction. Wow. I hadn't thought about that. So, like, when I'm getting into my work, because ultimately, I've been home since 1981. It's probably a 3-year period in which I was an addict. Mm. And I was a horrible addict. I wasn't good at this stuff at all, because I would immediately, when I get high, start talking politics. People say, "Man, you worn on my high, man," and I came up with fancy terms, expropriation, as opposed to just stealing somebody's stuff. Yeah. And what ultimately happened was that one day, in the middle of floating on a raft on the what's called, I said, if I assume that everything that I think about came as a result of being Black, came as a result of this or that, if I become conscious of that, then I need to take responsibility for myself.
Yeah.
And that was a real dramatic change. And what it led to was I no longer, the last time I went to jail, I could see a lot more clearly that it was so many people that was there. The last time I went to jail, and that was probably for maybe 60 or 70, 80 days. It was the longest period of time that I can say I consciously was punished.
Okay.
Because like, it's a certain thing when they say ignorance is bliss. Suppose you're no longer ignorant. What's being imposed upon you is a whole different level.
Yeah.
A whole different level. I believe, like say for instance, when I'm sitting beside attorneys, legal attorneys and what have you. And at the point that I resigned, retired from legal services from prisons with children. At that point, I had 4 or 5 attorneys working for me. And the distinction is is that, I would ask them, what do they think? I didn't ask them what did they know because I knew what I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to make an assumption that people's being tortured. I was there with people's getting tortured, and I was one of those people being tortured. So it was like, I think this. It was like there's a distinction between
I think and I know, yeah.
I think and I know. It's a real major distinction in that stuff. And so it was certain stuff. It was like stuff like ban the box. The most significant thing wasn't the policy piece. The most significant thing is that I kicked the giant and it started to awake. And, and the giant was 2 million people locked up and a majority group of Black people locked up. And when I kicked it, and I started talking about structural discrimination in terms of ban the box, it was the initial campaign wasn't ban the box. The initial campaign was save ourselves. When everybody else started jumping into what I was saying, it became all of us Nunn and ban the box. And ban the box wasn't just the question of employment. The campaign was how do we end structural discrimination? And the other part that was radically different is when everybody else thought that we simply banned the box, what happened when the giants started to wake up and they figure like they're entitled to some stuff? That's when movement happens. It wasn't happening just because there was unconscious people thinking that they had a piece of business that they need to trivially pursue. What happens when they think that the whole thing is a little bit corrupt? So, like, say, for instance, the distinction between other people that have engaged with voting rights around incarcerated people, a distinction probably that some of us that's way out there. We ain't saying that we want voting rights. We're saying that we want your job so we can make a decision.
Yeah. I want to add on. I want to sort of add on to that in terms of voting rights for prisoners, because I didn't know that that's a right that gets stripped away from them. But I don't, in terms of when we're trying to get people to reintegrate back into society, and people may have never voted before or never understood the importance of voting, something as small, well, voting isn't small, but something as sort of small as that right getting taken away and not showing people how to get it back or how to vote or how to make an educated vote. There's more to sort of the structural inequalities that happen when people come out of prison. I think it's just unfair for us to then expect that, then you're saying, why is the homie back? Is because they've gone back into the same situation. They haven't got necessarily new skills, and they're just going to rely on the things that, they worked as we say, to get them where they are.
You can have new skills, but if they practice in structural discrimination, don't mean your skill level is any less. So, like, people can get skilled up, but if you practice in structural or discrimination and racism, it offsets the skills. You still like standing out there in the unemployment line, or you're standing out there with an application in your hand that nobody's really going to consider, not fairly considered. And then when it became like, here's a challenge. When everybody is thinking about like they're gonna, can secure the right to vote for me, just me as an individual, they're diminishing the real argument. So like a 2000 election, the president of the United States was voted in probably by less than 6,000 votes. That became something that went to the Supreme Court, and at the time, I think that it was an election between, Gore and Bush. And Bush basically got his job through the Supreme Court in a case, right? And the information that they were struggling with in terms of the state that they flipped was Florida, right? There was multiple millions of people who couldn't vote as a result of felony convictions in Florida. So it was 2000 election. It wasn't until 2020 that they got the rights to vote. Right? And so it's like what I'm saying, that the limited argument and limited shade that people put on is like, if Al Gore would have won, we wouldn't have went into Afghanistan. We wouldn't have spent thousands of people's lives and then laid them on the battlefield. And we wouldn't necessarily our resources down the tube in terms of millions and millions and millions of dollars. So like what I'm saying, the challenge is that people keep saying that this is an individual problem. And I'm saying that it has a massive impact that affects everybody.
Yeah. So can I ask, in terms of, we've talked about, your time in prison and some of the things that you learned from it. But I'd love to focus on the things that you've done afterwards, because you've mentioned about, ban the box laws and, you haven't talked about shackling or pregnant women yet, but I'd love to know more about those initiatives that you've done once you came out.
Once I came out, as a formerly incarcerated person that wound up sitting in the seat of an executive director, and it was head of a public interest law office, some of the work included voting rights. I sued for people to have voting rights inside of prison, inside of the county jail. I sued, I helped push public policy that gave thousands of people the right to vote while they were on parole. 80,000 of them immediately when I actually championed the cause about voting in the county jail. When it came down to shackling of pregnant, because at the point that I got out, the first 6 years, I worked less than 100 yards from where I got out of prison. I started suing immediately.
You're letting me out. Should have done that now.
Yeah. Hold it. Homeboy, I sued. I started suing for double selling. I started suing for everything that was unjust that I thought that I could get away with. I sued them. But I didn't think that I was developing a profession in the trade. I just thought I was fighting back.
And
I thought, like, well, somebody needs to fight back, and I had attorneys around me, and they gave me access to stuff that I didn't necessarily have access to. But when at the point that I got out and I became executive director, I had a policy manager that actually started carrying that warrant of not shackling pregnant women. I could have had her do other stuff, but this is what we chose to do, and this is what we chose to support. And she went in and passed legislation around stop shackling pregnant women. And it was the first in the United States that actually took that position and actually had won. Other parts of it, as a result of them throwing me in a hole and locking me up, we sued, and when I became a new director, very shortly after I became a new director, I'm thinking about, man, I'm a director, and I got a public interest law office, and I know that people is tortured, and I know they're playing dirty. Why would I go and fight them and fight for what they consider the most dangerous people in the state prison system? They're the toughest of the tough. And then I went and visited my homeboy. And even though I had been out a long period of time, he was still in the hole.
Wow, still in the hole, like
he was still
isolation, 23 hours, no sunlight.
He was still in the hole. In fact, when I seen him, because he was getting probably an hour a day out of his cell, 23 hours locked down, and the walls were so high they very seldom showed them with sunlight. So he had changed colors.
Wow.
And I looked at him and damn, boy, I didn't remember you being this light.
It's like I was.
Black as I was. Like, what the hell, man? What are they feeding you? And when I left, that's when I was making a decision to actually to engage in a lawsuit that end long-term solitary confinement. Right? So those are like policy work that's generated through litigation and ultimately generated through policy work that goes through the legislature.
Yeah.
But there were other parts of it that that I ran into that, and by the way, I'm just now looking backwards because I've generally been trained to do the next things in front of me.
Mhm.
So the memoir is like a backwards look, like what did you accomplish? And some parts of what we accomplished is that when people talk about stuff like when they're talking to me, like the prison industrial complex, that was an obscure term in the Mike Davis book that me, Angela Davis, Ruthie Gilmore, Dylan Rodriguez, George Galvez, and others actually introduced it as public speak to have a frame so we could actually move consciousness.
Yeah.
And so people can consciously focus on what we need to do is dismantle some of this stuff because, like, by holding one person in prison, they're probably not educating 20 or 30 of them that's outside of prison. So like I'm saying, how do we connect that stuff? In addition to that, I was engaged in activities when I met Michelle Alexander. Michelle Alexander probably wrote one of the most impactful books in the United States around criminal justice history in probably a whole century.
What was it called?
The name of that book is called The New Jim Crow.
Okay. I haven't read it, but I think I have heard of it. So
The New Jim Crow, that's what Michelle wrote, in the book, So it's like, and at first, she probably was thinking that I was crazy too. Because at a certain point when I got out, some of the stuff that I was asking for, people didn't envision us having it. And in fact, some people's objected to us. And when I talk about the change of consciousness for when he kicked the giant, I can remember being in an argument with a formerly incarcerated person saying, well, maybe they should just ban the box after we serve 10 years. After you've been able to have a law-abiding life in 10 years. And I said, if I ain't got a job and I ain't got housing and I ain't got food, I doubt if I'm going to make it to 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm like,
what's going to happen? Yeah, exactly. You're just going to end up back in prison. It's just a cycle that continues.
Yeah, I ain't going to make it 10 years. And And I would say, like if I done got off parole and I done paid my penalty and all the rest of that stuff, I don't feel like I owe anybody anything. And I think that I done paid my penalty. Suppose I come and collect your rent every day. So you paid me for the money and you back here the day after the next day saying, all right, I need some more rent. So like, and what does it mean when we start calling ourselves formerly incarcerated people? We're challenging the narrative, because in some spaces they say like, oh, you're an ex-convict, Suppose like I would introduce you as the liar.
Yeah. It's sort of like bringing up your past mistakes and constantly hammering you over with them, being like, no, I'm going to remind you of what you did when, who knows how old you were, 17, 18, 19. Your life circumstances completely different. You served the time, haven't you? So it's that secondary sort of, I don't know if trauma is the word, but that secondary sort of, can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but discrimination to a certain extent or isolation along the frame.
The challenge is that some of us came through. We had a political awakening that people were readily accepting that we didn't readily accept. So it wasn't like we just banned the box. I went from being crazy and a few years back to 267 million people stay in the jurisdiction that then banned the box.
What is ban the box? Because we've mentioned it.
Ban the box is I don't know in the UK if you got that question on it. Have you been convicted of a felony?
We do have it, yeah.
Convicted of a crime. So it's like take it off the application. You might get a job.
Yeah.
just take it off the application. You might get be surprising how good. And by the way, they asked that question, at least in the United States, they asked that question to renters. I done bought property. The question never showed up.
Yeah. Well,
So,
that's
if
capitalism.
you got
for
money
you,
and
isn't it?
you flow with cash, nobody's asking you, you've been convicted of a felony. Should I take the money? They take the money.
And they're like, do it later. But
Yeah.
Enjoy
You in a
yourself.
gated community with money, you inside the gate. So like it's that way. So like and the notion. I was in Africa before Eddie Ellis died. I was in South Africa and I hung out with Eddie and I was hanging out with Angela Davis at a certain point. And me and Eddie stayed together. And I said, man, I ain't an inmate, man. I'm a convict. And man, I committed a felony. And Eddie said, man, why are you looking at it like that? How about like, can we be people again? Can we be a person? Can we be a human being? Then about time that we got finished having that conversation, I understood what it was to wear a label.
Yeah.
So like at a certain point, when you wear that label and they fighting Vietnamese people, killing gooks is easy. Wearing that label mean that when they actually gunning down people that are black people in the streets, it's a difference between killing my brother and killing a nigga.
Yeah.
So like, as long as we have those narratives and we have those labels that don't necessarily articulate the expression of our common humanity, we're vulnerable.
Yeah, that's very powerful, to be fair. Like understanding in terms of like the labels that people put on us or that we put on ourselves or that a system puts on you, and how that's really beautiful what he said. Like, can we just figure out how to be a person again? Can we figure out how to be a human again? That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful.
So like that's so that's some of there's some parts of the challenges that I'm overcoming. When I say kick the giant and he start waking, it's like what happened when Norris Henderson go from a unanimous jury verdict, because like in Louisiana we was they was being subject to Napoleonic law. And they didn't used to have a unanimous jury verdict. You can get found guilty if 10 out of 12 found you guilty.
I think it was always unanimous, to be fair. I always thought it was.
No, in one state it wasn't. That was in Louisiana. And Norris changed it, and that was a formerly incarcerated person in the lead. Not only did he change that right there, when he started organizing inside out strategy, and people from prison started writing their relatives while they were in prison and actually telling them, why don't you vote for this? And what he did, if you ever go to New Orleans, what you see sitting in the seat is a black woman sheriff. Norris elected a black woman sheriff. And that was the sheriff, so like for Desmond Meade, it wasn't like everybody was looking at the black people that were going to win when they were having the election in Florida as a result of them running for different offices. We took 1,000 people into Florida. We knocked on doors. We did hustle in terms of text messaging, and we did radio ads and everything else. And probably within a 2-hour period, we touched 87,000 people.
Wow.
So like that giant that's still there, like suppose a group of formerly incarcerated people get together and we didn't re-enfranchise more people than everybody else in the last 10 years. What happens about that? They still ain't woke up to that fact.
Yeah.
In the United States, they ain't saying like, whoa. They ain't saying like, they came and said, well, Dorsey, like probably this last 5 years, you'd have made like 150,000 people eligible to vote. Desmond Meade, you done did 20 million. So it's like, they don't see it. Then when they say, oh yeah, we're gonna get the right to vote, then what happens when we start saying, man, we want to run for public office?
We'll
you know,
see
so like
about-
that's the
yeah,
so like
that's
so
the
like
next
so
step.
that's the like we ain't broke that threshold, and you know, so like we just tiptoeing around. We just want the right to vote for you. So you know, in the back of our mind, we said, "Hey, we want the right to vote for our homeboy Pookie."
Yeah.
because Pookie, he's gonna know how to do community benefits agreement that's gonna level the playing field. You just think about something different, and you're thinking about like.
So I guess, like, by the sounds of it, like in terms of you've done quite a lot for the community. Like you're someone that was directly impacted by the American prison system, and coming out, as you were saying, you've worked with the Public Interest Law Office. Well, you were the director of it, the first formerly incarcerated director of it, which is just impressive. And what I'm hearing is somebody that, through all the trials that they went through, that you've come out and you've been like, right, I'm not going to leave those brothers behind. I'm not going to leave the people that are in the prison system that are suffering from structural inequality. I'm not leaving them behind. I'm bringing them with me, and we're making change.
Yeah, like when I got my parole date, there was a person who asked me a question: what was I going to do with my newfound freedom? And any answer I could have gave him would have been, you couldn't get around this. Yeah, I could have said, man, I'm gonna go out there, man, and smoke as much weed as I possibly can find. Really have wild keeping sex on the beach.
Just wilding out.
just going all the way out there, And I didn't necessarily I didn't answer his question. But 30 years later, he walked into my office and he didn't even remember the question. And that time I had an answer for him. I said, I will fight the remainder of my life since I got out of prison for securing the rights and a full restoration of civil and human rights of people in prison and the free people. So like, one of the peoples that I was really impressed with when I was in DVI in 1972 and a little bit part of 1973, I helped free him.
Yeah.
Then there's other peoples that came through the door that had actually litigated stuff that I was helped him get selected as a plaintiff. And they walked through the door and they coming into the Freedom and Movement Center. Over the last 6 years, I raised $2.5 million and bought a building. That's not necessarily for me, because like me and the administrative director, the day after we paid off the last payment, she retired. It's been less than a year and I retired. So we didn't buy the building for us. We bought the building for the next generation that's going to engage, because we're in a protracted struggle. If I had won the struggle, hell, I wouldn't be like, I'd be on the beach.
Yeah.
I'd be partying, No, but I think that there's generations of people that then came behind us. And I've had other revolutionaries that came home from prison and had been sent to prison, like political prisoners. I done seen them come home and they done spent decades in prison. And I've seen one or two of them start crying because the condition that we're living up under is worse than the conditions that they left. And, they didn't recognize massive homelessness. They didn't recognize gentrification of neighborhoods where they weren't welcome back in, and those neighborhoods became functioning ghettos. That would impact people. And by the way, when I came home from prison, people, I think they gradually change things. And you may not necessarily see that it's changed, but in the event that you walk in a decade later, you see it more clearly, and it's impacting you more clearly. In fact, when I got out and I went to the pool hall where I used to shoot pool and hang out, talking about, Aristotle, Socrates, and everybody else. They don't want to hear that shit.
No,
they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear this intellectual thing. And in the meantime, I'm wrestling with the notion man, I've been away 10, 11 years, homeboy. Y'all haven't even moved a block.
Yeah.
You're still standing in the same place. And in fact, your new Cadillac that was new when I went to prison, you're still driving it. What progress have you made? I learned a real critical lesson probably within the first 3 weeks. All my homeboys that came in and talked to me about what they used to do, I actually stepped away from them because I had things to do. And they would only talking about what they used to do. Yeah. I was thinking about, man, you know what? I need to breathe, and I need to actually figure out what did I do with the promise that I made. I made a promise to actually return to the community an asset instead of a liability. Standing in the pool hall wasn't that. And standing around people that just talked about, how oppressed they weren't that. What were they going to do with being oppressed? Mm-hmm. What kind of plan that they were going to hatch? What do they, I wasn't just responsible to think about what I'm going to go do is just make individual piles of money. And in fact, when the person asked me what I was going to do with the $2.5 million that they gave me, I could have probably said, man, I'm going to establish a retirement fund.
Become an investor.
Instead of I'm going to buy a building for all my homies because they still coming. And in fact, the project that I initiated and then it's almost finished is what happens when my homies is coming out at 30 years. They don't have any work life left. Mm. They can't be competitive because we didn't teach them the technology to be competitive.
The whole world has changed.
The whole world have changed. People are coming out saying they ain't never used a cell phone, let alone a text message, let alone get on the computer and actually have a space that they can command. They never had that stuff. So how could they be competitive? Mm. So what I decided to do was in West Oakland to restore a historical Black site and turn it into a transitional house so I could accept people getting out of prison as our seniors. Wow. Because they don't have the right to work. Now, within that right there, I told you earlier, in the letter that Kathy gave me back was how do we rebuild a community? Some of the things that I wind up doing until she gave me the letters back and I read the letters, it really surprised me that those things in part were shaped while I was a prisoner, and I'm only playing some of those things out. And it's more than just me. The giant is more than just me. It's several million people. There's probably about 2 million people that's currently locked up, and millions of us that have been processed through the system. So if that giant becomes fully conscious, it will change the landscape and the politics of this whole nation.
Definitely. And I want to see that happen one day, because I do think that we, obviously prisons have a purpose within society. There's a reason for law and order, but I feel like after people have come out of prison and even during prison, there's nothing not that there's nothing, but it seems like the system is more focused on either making money or people coming back and reoffending. And that makes, to be fair, I think it's just more concerned about money and not treating people as humans, because we're already taking away their liberty, us treating them less than human. And then when they go and leave, they've got, as you were saying, they may have skills, but then there's all the structural inequality that happens around it. Or they may not have any skills because there are prisons that don't try and equip people with those skills. For me, it's just flawed, and it doesn't really work, to be honest with you. And it's a waste of money because it doesn't work.
How about this? If punishment actually worked, we'd still have slavery. They was beating us. They was doing everything else. Yeah, we just been like happy campers, just like, don't hit me again. So it doesn't work. And the other part is that I think other structures, like the structure of the family. It was like, at first when I initially came home, I was angry.
Mm.
What happened when I still legitimately and honestly started loving people? I'm gonna free my homeboys because I'm messing over the homeboys. And I could say I'm gonna free my homeboys because they can be useful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna free my homeboys because I love my homeboys. It's like we doing this interview on Monday. Where was I at on Saturday? I was inside of San Quentin prison, giving them books.
Wow.
What kind of bird can fly?
Yeah.
I was like, some parts of what I wrote was to them. Let's not die for the cause. Let's live for the cause and change the shape of the world. So like if they would have had the right to vote in Florida, we weren't killing people in Afghanistan. We would have voted Democrat.
Or Iraq. And they committed war crimes in Iraq.
Yeah. We could have had, we probably could have solved this problem and saying like, damn, we in Palestine. We didn't agree with the first deal. That's along the next generation saying, oh man, something messed up. And I'm hoping my generation, man, I didn't make that decision. These other guys, I was locked up in prison. I couldn't do anything. I'm here now.
Dorsey, so I just wanted to, I've loved this whole conversation that we've had, and I just wanted to ask you one final question. Say if there's a young Black boy that is incarcerated, or that has been through the prison system, how can something that help them with an understanding of themselves?
Assess what the problem is and take full responsibility for what the solution is. When I was floating around in that raft, it wasn't like, I was thinking to have access to other people's stuff was no longer fulfilling to me. It was, how do I access stuff that actually either belong to me or belong to the community? In certain titles, in things that I acquired, is that I can see transitions that were really meaningful. Like, my kids don't call me Dorsey, my kids call me Pops.
Yeah.
People at first when I came home, they didn't necessarily respect that I had the ability and had acquired a hands-on education. And some of the experiences that a young kid that's gone through the system is that what happens when you come across the reality that they beat you, they imprisoned you, and at a certain point, you're still not broken. So like stuff that I think about is I ran around South Africa looking for Mandela because I knew that he wasn't broken. Hey man, listen, give me some of this. Give me some of this new game.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch up with Mandela, but I caught up with Winnie. And when she stepped in the room, and I was at the International Conference on Racism, and she put everybody out that wasn't from the African diaspora. And we start having a different conversation.
White people, y'all gotta leave.
No, she said, man, y'all need to come back. Y'all got resources and you can buy stuff here. And that. She gave us a whole list of things that, but the thing that she basically said was, as a result of racism and the consistent practices of that inside of the diaspora that was outside of the continent of Africa, that we were scarred. And we was at one point saying, well, they took me to Panama, and they took me here, it was almost like doing the Oppression Olympics. And they said, man, we were all scarred. Let's hold it. And I'm sitting there, and by that way, they're taking the language. So I was at an African international conference on the practice of racism with a whole bunch of Black folks. And we spoke different languages. We spoke Spanish. We spoke Dutch. All of those people. And they still, you remember, like initially I said, man, do they do this here? Man, at this point, man, I've been to South Africa. I've been through the Bahamas. I've been through New Zealand. I've been through El Salvador. I done ran up and down a whole bunch of different places. And like I said before, every place the Queen set her roots into, we got screwed, homie. So I don't know how patriotic that you could be. How did you get there?
Oh, that killed me.
So at a certain point, take responsibility for where you're at right now and move forward.
I've lost my breath. That was funny. So Dorsey, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast. Can you tell people where they can find your book, where they can find your memoir, and where they can find out more about you?
They can find the book. They can look up Heyday Publishing. And they can be, I don't know if y'all got a Barnes and Noble over there, if y'all got bookstores, it's already out there.
Amazon.
And other thing that they can do, they can contact Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, which is my primary organization, and is located at 4400 Market Street, Oakland, California, 94602. And if they see this the podcast, please give me some feedback, because like what I'm saying may not necessarily be sitting well with some peoples, and what I'm saying could be sitting extremely well with other people. And I'm always looking for a Conrad, not a fight.
Bro, thank you, Dorsey. So I'm going to put all your links into the show notes so people can go and check that out. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a good day.
All right, man. Thanks for having me, and I hope you have a good day.
Bless.
All right. Peace.